We're ready to start sharing, and if you can, you may continue eating, and I think we can eat and talk and listen at the same time. So, welcome to this time of remembering Carol. We represent really many different groups of people who've known Carol over the years, over her 98 years. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, stepchildren, cousins, College Mennonite Church members, Goshen College associates, neighbors and friends. I am John Smith. I am connected to Carol several ways. First of all, Carol was my mom's first cousin through the Schertzes. Secondly, we crossed paths at College Mennonite Church many times. And in the last year, we live in the same wing of Greencroft Manor 4. So, anyway, I'm very happy to share, to sort of be the MC here in sharing. So I'll be glad to get us started. This can be very informal. Even if you had no idea before you came that you might say something, you feel free to do so because this is off the cuff. It's nothing formal. There are no age limits. Anywhere from 3 to 100 works. So let's get started. Anybody have something they're ready to share? Rachel. And talk right into the middle of it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rachel Nafziger-Hartzler, and I'm thankful to Carol for many things. I learned to know her first when I was the MYF sponsor for her children. 50 years ago, that's a little more than 50 years ago. And this is like old Goshen being here. I know that doesn't quite include the cousins and a few other people, but for so many people, it's like coming back to this place where we were 50 years ago, and it's been really good. And to do it in a way to honor Carol Oyer just seems so right. So my condolences to the family, but thank you for sharing her with the rest of the church and the community and the world.
Carrie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie, one of Carol's grandchildren, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without her, that's for sure. She would not want me to go on and on about her. She would probably really not want me to do that, but I just wanted to share a few things on behalf of my sisters, Rachel and Annika, and I. There are so many things that I learned from her. I learned to sing in rounds, or I should say we. We learned to sing in rounds in English, but also in German and Latin. We learned to bake bread, pies, cookies, to make cornmeal mush, muesli, hot cross buns, orange cranberry walnut salad, spinach balls, yogurt, applesauce, Vidalia onion sandwiches, and tomato and peanut butter sandwiches. We learned to make Christmas wreaths from tree trimmings and to place and light candles on a Christmas tree. We learned to appreciate birds, especially hummingbirds. We learned to decorate cakes and to make centerpieces, including decorating cakes like in the shape of animals for children's birthdays. I never mastered carving roses into butter, though, like she did. We learned the enormous importance of living simply so that other people in this world may simply live. We learned the joy of a brisk outdoor walk, even during the winter. We learned to make art out of everyday objects, like turning bread bags into toy balls, or collecting beautiful fall leaves and turning them into waxed placemats. We learned that there are women who love math and physics and excel at those subjects, her being one of them. We gained, especially I gained, a fascination with Mandarin and Chinese history. We learned to take care of newborn babies and to take care of, but also play with our children. We learned that there are grandmothers out there who love to watch and play sports. We learned to love books and libraries. We learned to love holidays. For example, at Easter, she taught us to blow out eggs and then decorate them, and she had a tree that we hung them on as an Easter tree. We learned the great comfort of being a child who sung to at bedtime, nestling bird, North Star, in heaven, such a refuge ere was given, truly. We learned to bring down fevers and soothe sore throats and how to treat wounds and how to make someone who's sick feel so deeply cared for. We learned that nurses sometimes know more than doctors, especially when the doctor tells them that being nauseous during pregnancy means you don't know how to take care of a baby, let alone yourself. Not true. We learned the importance and the joy of imagination as by learning that someone named Jackie Frost paints windows silver, makes leaves blush, and turns meadows white. We learned the importance of friendship with some friends so close, our family even called them aunt and uncle. Some of them are here today. And above all, we learned to forgive and to love unconditionally. So, rest in peace, Grandma.
Thank you. My name is Susan Fisher Miller, and I grew up here in Goshen as a kind of adopted member of the Oyer family. My mother and Carol were very long-time friends, and they even arranged to enter the Elkhart Hospital 2 days apart, and Sally and I were born on July 2 and July 3. And in my earlier years, I always felt like Sally had gotten in there ahead of me and was older than me, and now I'm just so glad Sal is older than I am. But it led to a kind of myth that we told that our mothers lounged away for that postpartum week you used to get in the hospital, side by side in some kind of ward in the Elkhart Hospital. And those are the roots of Sally and my friendship and contributed to the bond that Carol and Pauline had together. I think of 3 stages of knowing Carol. One was in my young years, I spent a great deal of time in the Oyer households, one on Main Street and then in my neighborhood on Grayroy Drive. Carrie ably rattled off the cuisine that was offered so generously and with so much hospitality in that household. For me, it was entering and smelling homemade bread and then being offered the delicacy virtually never given in my own home of cinnamon toast, bread and homemade bread and butter, and then generous sprinkles of sugar and cinnamon blended together in a shaker. I could count on that there. There were many lively meals around that table that I got to enjoy. And on the theme of hospitality, I would say the extended family members of Aunt Mary and Aunt Verna were routinely included there as part of the table, and that was part of Carol's quiet generosity there to make that meal available to us. The Oyer home also had a different, very contemporary European vibe. It was different than many other houses in Goshen, and one of the things that marked that was the cuckoo clock that announced the hour, and I used to love to observe that there. So Carol welcomed me. I was a member of the family, and I thought of her almost as a very warm surrogate mother. But there were limits to this. When, in the Main Street house, Sally and I decided to shear the beautiful curly hair on Becky's beautiful doll all the way to the scalp, we were firmly reprimanded by Carol. We were scolded. I just can still see standing there in that kitchen and getting an earful about what we had done. She disciplined Sally, and then my surrogate mother said, "And Susan, if you were my child, I'd spank you too." Lesson learned. Later, I had an opportunity as a student in a Goshen College Europe course. It would have been in the summer of 1978, to observe Carol in a leadership role, assisting John Oyer in leading a medieval history course. And we traversed Belgium, France, Germany, and it was a rewarding experience. If John Oyer could stand on a moving bus, musing to his students on the motivations of Joan of Arc on her way to the stake, it was Carol Oyer who got 25 wayward students onto that bus and made sure we were lined up to get our next meal. In some cases, in out-of-the-way places like Cistercian monasteries and hostels. Finally, as we, and our parents grew older, I had an opportunity to observe close up the power of friendship between Carol and my mother, Pauline. And I am reminded of that in the line from the Irish blessing, "May the hand of a friend be always near you." Especially after my dad died, Carol ministered in friendship to my mom, and they really, really enjoyed one another. I don't think any two grandmothers could have shared as fully and as proudly about their grandchildren as those two friends. And that's a pretty beautiful legacy. And you know, Carol also kind of changed from surrogate mother to treat me as a friend in my adult years. She did me various kindnesses. She sent a wooden peg game for our children to learn. And once out of the blue, she sent me a little repurposed shaker up to my home in Evanston full of cinnamon and sugar so that I could make cinnamon toast. I hear Carol's voice in my ear, so distinct, self-effacing but wry, quick-witted, and kind. I am so grateful for her life and that I have her voice in my ear.
Hi. I'm Carol's grandson, basically. And she was a really nice person. Her family loved her. And she was pretty grateful to our family. Others were also, and she had a life, so that's pretty normal. And thank you.
Well, even though Carol and I were double third cousins, or John, was it double fourth cousins, once removed? I forget. But okay. Well, anyway, we were double third cousins. We were both Schertz girls from Illinois. We both attended the Metamora Mennonite Church all our lives. All our young lives. And we both graduated from Metamora High School, but we never knew each other. I knew her name, and I don't know if she even knew my name. But I did know her mother, and that was Aunt Mary, who was, I don't know how many of you know that her mother and your great-great-great-grandmother was dearly loved by the children at Metamora. And she was always called Aunt Mary, and she was one of the favorite Sunday school teachers. But anyway, then, even though Carol and I didn't know each other, she went on to college, and she was graduating from college about the time that I started high school, so you know the difference between us. And by the time I entered high school, or college, why, she was already married to John Oyer. And then fast forward a few years, and I had graduated from Goshen College. Carol and John had been in Europe, all over. And in the 60s, I think it was, we returned to Goshen, and John and Carol had returned to Goshen. And we found ourselves at College Mennonite Church. We were in the same Sunday school class, the home builders class. We were in the same small group. Let's see, what else? But there were lots of things in which we were doing the same things. And both of our husbands were on Goshen College faculty. So during the years that followed that, we had many, many connections, and there are lots of stories to tell about Sally and Susan, and because they're the same age as our daughter Jane. But I won't go into those now. And then I would say it must have been about a year and a half ago. Lots had happened in between those years, but a year and a half ago, Carol was at Greencroft, a widow, and I was at Greencroft, a widow, and one day the phone rang, and it was Carol, and she said, "Why don't you come over to talk?" So I did, and that started a renewed relationship, and we visited fairly regularly, and we talked about everything. We talked about Metamora, we talked about our children, and we talked about world issues. I don't think there were any topics that we didn't cover, but those were very, very good years. So I'm going to remember Carol for many things, and a lot of those have been mentioned already, but she was a wise and caring person, and she loved her family, and she loved the church. I also won't forget, and this has been mentioned, her culinary gifts. And when I open my recipe file, there are several times that I'll be reminded of her and recipes that were favorites of all of our family. There's one thing that I do have to confess. I am envious. I've always been envious of her because at 80-something, she learned to play bridge. And she gave all the credit to Art. She said he was so patient and such a good teacher. So I'm gifted that Carol was my friend, our family's friend, and John also. Yeah.
I'm Kathy Oyer. Carol is my mother. And I'm reading something from Claudia Smucker. Okay, so that's Mom's stepdaughter. I had such high regard for Carol and loved her creativity, her sense of style, and her love for reading. In one of the last email exchanges I had with her, she told me that while she could no longer see to read, she was grateful that family had connected her with audiobooks. I have so many good memories of talking about books that we had read, politics, and her hospitality as we enjoyed her amazing cooking. Always, in the middle of the table, there was a beautiful centerpiece. She was one of the most intelligent and articulate people I had ever met. I think one of her biggest sadnesses was when one by one, so many of her friends with whom she shared so much all passed away. She was always so grateful for the family, her family. Her love and kindness towards her grandchildren was deep, and in her humble Mennonite way, she was immensely proud of all of you. She was always very supportive of my ministry at College Mennonite Church, which I appreciated so much. She was truly a gift to the world, and she will be missed. Claudia. And I have a friend from high school, one of my good friends from high school, who developed rheumatoid arthritis when she was in high school and has had a long struggle. And she wanted to she wrote something that she wanted me to read. She lives in Pennsylvania. I met Carol soon after I met Kathy in the summer of 9th grade. I knew Carol through her daughter, Kathy, and saw Carol in Kathy, but I also knew Carol as her own person, and she saw, encouraged, and recognized me on my own. I was impressed by her beauty, grace, and variety of skills. She knew so much from nursing, and while my body was breaking down before my eyes, She was my Google decades before Google arrived on the scene, with her explanations and advice regarding the body. She was able to do so many things so well and at the same time. Her creativity, having designed their house and created such a beautiful home and sense of artistry, are several of the parts of Carol that I see in Kathy, as well as Carol's nurturing passed on in care of her son, Terry. Carol's culinary skills particularly delighted me. During high school, Kathy and I carried our lunches to school. And once, probably when Kathy noticed me eyeing her meatloaf sandwich and pickle, Kathy suggested that we could trade lunches, and we did that regularly. I don't remember what I made for my lunches, probably most often peanut butter and jelly, but I do remember Carol's wonderful lunches made on homemade bread. I know I got the better end of the deal, and I know how much Carol delighted in my enjoying her food. As graduation approached, Kathy and I were trying to figure out how to celebrate. Carol said she could make a dinner party for 6. How would a Chinese meal be? We carefully selected 4 friends to join us and had the best feast with Carol's authentic Chinese dishes. The dish that I was most excited about was lobster, something I had never had before. At the end of the meal, I asked if I could have a bag to put the lobster shells in so I could make a bracelet with them. Carol said she would take care of that for me, and later, Kathy presented me with a bag of perfectly cleaned and oiled shells. Although I tried mightily, I could never successfully make a bracelet that didn't crumble when I tried to make it. But Carol, who may have realized it would never work, hadn't scoffed at my idea and offered to clean the shells to help me carry it out. Throughout the years, we'd write back and forth. After I became completely disabled, she'd include an annual generous check to help me with my medical bills. Carol was a kind and generous person, and I am forever thankful for the impact she had on my life and on others. Beth Suter.
I'll say something. This is Barb Meyer-Reed. I'll say something quick before I give this to Mom. I was thinking on my way here today that Carol was one of the unsung heroes of my youth. And I wouldn't have even thought of it, until today. And I thought, this is a town, and even this is a family, of many sung heroes. But she was an unsung hero. And I just think of, the home that she designed and decorated and the hospitality for so many people and her care of elders, which is often an unappreciated gift. But also I think about this quiet, intelligent person who raised, bore and raised a whole pack of leaders. And anyway, that doesn't just happen. Yeah, Barb Meyer-Reed.
I'm Mary Ellen Meyer. I wanted to make a comment about 2 areas that have been mentioned, one area that has been mentioned and one that hasn't. This has to do with the bridge. Those of you who know this Art Smucker family know that they are ardent bridgists. And they played, after the children were gone, they would have bridge games going on online all the time. And after Carol and Art were married, he felt it would be a good thing for her to learn to play bridge. So one of the last faculty retreats that we had up at Camp Amigo, he asked if there were some people who would be willing to join him as he taught bridge to Carol. So Bob Yoder and I agreed that we would do that. And we spent the rest of Art's life playing 400 bridge at his house, learning the American bridge system that he was most familiar with and was very clear about learning the conventions as they were to be played. After he died, Don Clemens, I had seen him earlier, I don't know if he's, Don Clemens stepped in Art's place, and Don and Bob and Carol and I played bridge until probably a year and a half ago. She maintained her ability to think in a bridgely way, but as her vision decreased, then we tried to think of how we could get bigger cards or cards that had 4 colors instead of 2 colors. And then her hearing became more difficult. And so eventually we stopped playing bridge, which all of us missed. And I know she did too. But that was a fun time and a new experience for me. The other thing I want to mention is our two families had a 50-year history in a sort of an unusual way. I just thought about it today that this Christmas would be the 50th Christmas that we would have celebrated a Christmas, what we used to call the Oyer Sing. We called it the Oyer Sing even after there weren't any more Oyers that came. And this started in the winter of 1974, when the Oyer family was in Austria on sabbatical and our family was in Paris. And at Christmas time, I think Carol had come home maybe because her mother was sick. And the ones that were left came to Mont des Oiseaux in France, a children's home there, when our family was in Paris. And we met there in a rather barren, gray sort of a room that I remember, with a very spindly sapin, or pine tree with not very many branches off, but red ribbons on it as far as I remember. It was decorated. And Oyers had brought with them hymnals and some very interesting Gottliche Chorlied books, Geistliches Chorlied books, that had Pretorius and various interesting earlier songs. And we did a lot of singing together that Christmas. I don't think there would have been more than 8 or 10 of us, probably. But it was a lot of fun. And when we got back home, Oyers invited us to do this again at Christmas time, and they lived on Greyroy. And this started a tradition of gatherings every Christmas time with music which expanded because Mary came. And Mary brought things from the Yale hymnal and from Oxford hymnal and from various other medieval music books, and we learned more things and gathered more music, and sometimes there were as many as 20 of us there, and we were usually in. Bill and Phil. Yeah. Oh, Bill. Yeah, there were other people. Bill and Phil and Art. Well, Paul. No, but Bill and Phyllis sometimes were there, and Daryl and Marion Hostetler. Anyway, it included anybody that was willing to sing. Still the Oyer Sing. At Christmas time. And of course, then we had a little lunch, and a special of those things that included some of the things that have been mentioned. I mean, we all have the recipe for spinach balls. We all have the recipe for the coffee punch that she made, of the lovely coffee. It wasn't really punch, it was coffee and ice cream and stuff all mixed together, which was very good. And her breads, and everybody else contributed things too, but the things that Carol made were always better. And they always had a big Christmas tree with the candles on it. And the singing ended with a round that, oh yeah, I do have to mention Al's contribution. He would come with suitcases full of hymnals and files that had loose leaf things in them, and these suitcases were always deposited in the middle, and then people had to hand out the pieces to everybody. And then at the end, every time, Carol would take a branch off the tree and light it to be sure it wouldn't take fire. And then with that, and then there was a bucket of water or sand or something there to protect us in case it didn't work right. And we lit all the candles, and we sat and enjoyed it, and we sang O Tannenbaum, and Silent Night in German and English, and other things. And then with a snuffer would go and take each candle out one by one until there was only one candle left. And we'd all sit there and watch that in quiet until it was time to put that one out. So that has continued, and as I say, we continue to call it the Oyer Sing. And last Christmas, actually, there were 2 of the daughters there, I think, and 1 of the granddaughters, right? Something like that. And so there are still some Oyers that come, even though Carol was not able to come toward the end because of her hearing difficulty. That was a big sadness for her. Her hearing difficulty made music unpleasant. It wasn't just that it was off key, it was noise. It was negative. And she couldn't listen to music anymore. So after Mary and Carol couldn't come, it was a different thing. But this Christmas will be 50 years, and we will see who comes to the Oyer thing.
Rich Meyer, I would remember that it was John who organized everything and got us all in parts. Today I sing tenor half the time because I hear John saying, "Do we have some tenors here?" And it was Mary then who led the singing, and it was Carol who stopped it because it was time for us to eat.
Susan mentioned that many of Carol's friends and relatives have died. But of the 24 Schertz cousins, we have one here today, Mary Phyllis. And I just could you at least stand up for people to see? And the thing is that she's not only a cousin to Carol through the Schertzes, but also she's a double first cousin through the Yoders. And there were 24 first cousins in the Schertzes, and it's only Phyllis and Bob Smith, who I talked to on the phone yesterday in Florida, that are still remaining. Yes. Mary Phyllis, I'm sorry.
Carol was a very loving, caring person. I will say that for her. Must I? Carol was a very loving, caring person and had a personality that just made you want to love her all over. And my sisters were very close. My one was very close to Carol because they were about the same age, and my older sister was Lois's age. And we would go out to Illinois to visit Grandma, and of course there was Aunt Mary, and she married Uncle Man, who was a brother to my mother, and Aunt Mary was a sister to my father. And we would walk from Grandmother's house about 1 block down the road, I don't know if that house is there yet, up to where you lived, and that was always interesting for me. And sometimes we would stay there for a while, and Aunt Mary was so sweet. And now I just feel like that rubbed off onto Carol, too. She's just about as sweet as you can find. And so, as I say, I think I learned to know her even better here at Goshen when we'd stop and visit her, because I was out of town, way out of town, Pennsylvania, and I didn't get to Illinois very often or to Goshen that often. But anyway, I loved her dearly, and I love her kids. And I think I adopted one here. But anyway, thank you, John. Is there anything else you want to know?
Thank you.
I will say, I bet I have more great-grandchildren than I'm going to have my 28th great-grandchild this summer. Oh, they heard me. They heard me.
My name is Vic Stoltzfus. I take you back to 1982. At that point, I was an academic dean of Goshen College, and one of the happy privileges was to visit our study service term units as they were scattered in various places in the world. And Marie and I were guests of John and Carol Oyer in East Germany. For the younger ones, I should say there's one Germany now, but there used to be 2 Germanys. And East Germany was under the control of communist Russia, and they somehow were open to our unit being at the University of Jena in Jena, East Germany. It was a difficult place for John and Carol to have a unit because they were very leery of having American young people with unguarded contact with German young people. So they kept them on the move, this museum and that museum, and they had a communist minder with them to make sure that all the things were observed. But Marie and I should say we're so grateful that John and Carol offered us hospitality, a place to sleep at night, Carol's wonderful cooking. I did make one mistake. I had been a student of John's back in the 50s, and I knew how much he enjoyed current events. So I sneaked a copy of the New York Times in the bottom of my suitcase. I thought that would be safe, but he mildly rebuked me for taking that chance. Had that been discovered, we would both been in trouble.
I'm going to read something from another cousin, and we'll close soon, but if there are some others that have some things to say, think about it, and we will give you time. I'll give it to John right now. Yeah, go ahead. John Byler, nephew.
Yeah. John David Byler. I am nephew of Aunt Carol, so it's a joy for me to say some words on her behalf today. Peter and Magdalena Esch were married in January of 1881, and in December of that year, our grandfather Schertz was born. And my brothers and I grew up on the home farm place. Mary Phyllis talked about a block walk from where Peter and Magdalena Esch lived on the corner to Manuel and Mary's, Carol's home. Those times were hard. My grandfather Schertz, his first wife, died in 1918, and I think probably that was due to complications of influenza, I'm guessing. I'm not sure. But there were some joys. Peter and Magdalena and the farm just north. By the way, this road that one crossed in that block was the road where Abraham Lincoln traveled on his circuit. Anyway, the farm north, they had a rose plant. And this is a rose that it's about this big. It blooms the first week in June, the first cutting of alfalfa, when strawberries are ripe. It's an absolutely beautiful rose. The fragrance is unbelievable. And Peter and Magdalena and the Summer family cultivated that rose. How do I know about this? I know because I have that rose at the end of my porch. Emmy Summer, who lived to be 100, when we moved to Washington in 1976, brought a cutting of that rose to us. And I'm using that as a metaphor for Aunt Carol today. She was dependable, resilient, always there for us, steadfast, faithful, and absolutely beautiful in every way. And my children, our children, Peter and Rebecca also send their love today. They were here in college, of course, and they have many fond memories. And our daughter yesterday said, I think Aunt Carol, well, she is a link to a grandmother that we haven't met. And, you know, the last song we sang today, I'll Praise My Maker. So this is to be continued. So peace and all good to you.
I'll make this real quick. I'm Don Smucker. I'm one of the Smucker clans. And we have two things that we have to talk about here real briefly. One is, if we still play bridge. One is that Carol, the Smucker clan is really very happy with Carol and the Oyer family for a number of reasons. And one in particular was Dad had something to occupy himself. So that worked out really well. And I'd say a second comment is that for every yin, there's a yang. And as good a cook as Carol was, you need to try her cowboy coffee.
One cousin, John Blosser, is in Spain right now, but he wanted to share some of his thoughts about Carol, so he sent me this by email 2 days ago. John Blosser, by the way, was not only a first cousin once removed of Carol, but also they knew each other because John was on the faculty here in art at Goshen. And John says, I'm honored and pleased to be invited to share a few thoughts about my first cousin once removed. My father, Ralph Yoderblosser, was the first cousin. For as long as I can remember, Carol and John, and then Art Smucker, attended the sizable and lively Yoder reunions with then 3 generations at least. But when I moved to Goshen, Indiana 25 years ago, Carol became more of a significant presence in my life. She invited me to her family gatherings, and as time went on, Carol and Art had a handful of the other Oyer clan who would gather at Trolley Cafe for lunch and rich conversation with our cousin Martha Gay. When she and Art finally sold their house and moved to Manor 4 Greencroft, Carol kindly donated a Chinese scroll to me, which she had treasured over the years. Then occasionally she would check in on me, usually by email, sometimes to share family news, but often just to ask how I was doing. I very much appreciated this loving gesture. Probably most memorable, though, have been the more recent visits with her and her condo, when she would reminisce about her mother, Mary Yoder Schertz, younger sister to my grandmother, Carrie Yoder Blosser. And she would share stories from her family's rich experiences abroad to tales of her childhood experience of getting to spend time in Chicago, where, though she was too young to really work, she lucidly recalled loving to spend time in the family restaurant, the Copper Kettle on Broadway, and explored the surrounding neighborhoods. Many of her stories were new to me, so I greatly treasured these gems of memory. So what a gift to me as a younger cousin. Most of our family of her generation had passed away long ago. I will certainly miss her welcoming me as I entered her door to simply sit in her loving and lively presence. John Blosser, September 27, 2024. Any additions? This has been nice sharing. Thank you very much.